Thanks for joining. If you missed the first session, this series is about cybersecurity insurance. My name is Chris Cochran. I'm the advisory CISO and chief evangelist at Huntress. That means I spend most of my time advising, creating content, and speaking to IT and MSP leaders and practitioners about cybersecurity practices so they can serve their customers better. And I have the honor of kicking off these sessions to get the party started. Last week, we had an incredible journey in session one where we dove deep into the security controls and we talked all about insurance and the policies. Next week, we're going to wrap everything up on June 29th. So be sure to put that on your calendars. And we're going to be talking about a winning strategy, the business review, where you will learn how to proactively integrate cyber insurance into your security services. And today we are in session 2, and we are talking about tackling objections, smooth talking. Each of these sessions are going to be presented by 2 of the leading voices in insurance sector from FifthWall Solutions. First, we have Dustin Bolander. He's the Vice President of Operations and Technology, owner of the Clear Guidance Partners. Dustin, he brings a wealth of experience from the operational and technical side of the house to help you align to your business goals. The other half of this duo is Will Brooks. He is a cyber insurance evangelist. He dedicated his career to demystifying the complexities of cyber insurance and making it accessible and understandable for all of us. And with that, let's go ahead and kick it over to Dustin and Will. Over to you, gents.
Hi, everyone. So first off, I'm Reed. Dustin has a lot more hair than me. So Dustin was filling in last week. I'm filling in this week. I'm the president of FifthWall. And so my superpower is cyber insurance nerdiness. So that's what I'm bringing to the table. And I'm excited to talk to everyone about it. So I think one of my superpowers would be if I could have Dustin's hair, I'd take it because he's got some thick locks. So Will, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Dustin can't grow your beard. So, I mean, we got,
True.
It's 2 dozen in one hand and another bird in the bush. I think that's how the phrase goes.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Also, there's some great objections coming in here. I love Tyler Owen said, "How do I know it's working?" I think that's a great. It's like I don't really know if your security is doing anything. So, and
if it's working, how do I know it's working?
You know it's working because you haven't gotten hacked yet. I mean, that could be a response. I don't know. Anyway, so again, Reed's here on the call. He's the president at FifthWall, and then I am Will Brooks. I am a solutions engineer, kind of channel facing, MSP channel facing for our company, kind of the gateway for MSPs to enter into FifthWall Solutions, help you understand what we do, partner with you, let you know what partnership is all about. But we wanted to come in here today to kick off week 2 of our masterclass webinar series. Becky's here too. She's going to stay on. If you have questions, please ask them in the chat, and we'll make sure we address those as we go. Again, we're talking all about objections today, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm a lot more prepared today, so it's all ready to go.
And for those of you that don't know me, hi, Becky Teal. I'm here at Huntress. I run our community efforts. Honestly, I'm here today to interrupt with your questions from chat and Q&A. So I'll interrupt periodically with questions and periodically have questions of my own because inquiring minds want to know.
I love it. Love it. Love it. All right. So like Becky said, throw them in the Q&A, throw them in the chat. We want to make sure that your questions get addressed. We are talking about objections today, and we had that one. I am curious before we get started, because every slide today is an objection. You're going to hear these objections when you talk about cyber insurance. You're going to hear these objections when you talk about security controls. We want to hit on all of them, but I am curious today, because Becky, you brought this up. What is the most ridiculous objection you have ever heard? Before we get into the standard ones, I am curious what the most ridiculous one. So throw that in the chat if you got anything to share as we get started here. So on our end, the way we've crafted this, just so you get a good idea before we get started, some of these objections are going to pertain to cyber insurance. Some of them are going to pertain to the MSP control sales, but they all work in tandem with one another. They usually play off of one another. The whole point of this masterclass, just to refresh, is to say, hey, how do I incorporate, I don't access the internet, so who cares? It's a good one. The whole idea here is to incorporate cyber insurance into the security services you're already providing. It is more in line with what we are seeing. I mean, it is a rapidly changing industry. Insurance is constantly shifting in the cyberspace. It's not stagnant like all those other lines. So what we're going to do here is dive in right now. So I'm actually going to give this, I want to read this part, but then give it over to Reed a little bit to explain in more detail. I don't need cyber insurance. Isn't that what you, the MSP, are for? And the reason we bring this one up is a lot of times MSPs will get that pressure from a client. Hey, if an incident happens, if a network is ransomware, if a network goes down, the question you get, the pressure you get from the client is, hey, Mrs., Mr. MSP, how fast can you get me back up online? I need to get back up to work. So on your end, Reed, what's the approach here?
So I think what we're addressing, just before I jump into this, is, we've got a lot of synergies when it comes to what insurance is looking for, asking for, and lining up for the security that we know our clients should and need to have, right? So let's bring it together. Let's allow us to kind of paint a picture of, we're having similar this is a lot of the objection handling that we encounter too, because we can't go straight to a policy anymore. It's well, you've got to be this tall to ride now, right? You have to be able to have these security solutions in place to be able to even be eligible, let alone get reasonable rates, right? So we're going to go to kind of the opposite side. So if this is someone that's saying, yeah, but I don't need the insurance piece, which is a little dangerous because we're going to explain why. But the piece here is that what's often overlooked is they're looking at one, and I say they, the client, they're looking at one specific piece of the situation to say, I just got hurt. Now, how do I become whole again? Right. And so they're answering that question with what they already can see and understand. What we want to show is well, there's a lot of things that happen that you aren't seeing, right? And you don't really see these things in the news. But when it comes to breach occurs, we're now right at boom, right? We have a lot of issues trying to, on left of boom, getting the right solutions in place doesn't matter, because now that we're right at boom, breach occurs and we kick off a lot of services that insurance is now going to start paying for. Why? Because these are a required part of the process for many states, right? And so whenever we look at the initial kickoff, right, we're dealing with potentially, I'm going to use the word potentially because we don't know, right? A breach occurs. Potentially, there could be exposed PII, PHI, but any type of protected information. Well, we want to get legal involved and legal counsel. Someone already corrected that. So we'll make that typo correction. Involved to make sure that we are understanding, state requirements, if there's any industry requirements, even requirements outside the country, right? So there's a lot that can get into the mix very quickly where time is of the essence. So we want to bring legal in, and then we want to establish that attorney-client privilege. And then we need to get answers, right? So I think a lot of times what end clients don't understand is when it comes to forensics, this isn't a simple, let's just pop open the hood, we'll take a look, see what's going on. Oh, there's the issue, right? It's a very specific and it's a very costly process, right? It's very expensive. We already know legal is expensive. Forensics gets up there as well. And what happens then is once the information that is answering the who, what, when, why, where, how gives into place, well, what are we doing with that, right? So do we have to notify those that were affected? Do we have to bring in PR because it's becoming a big issue? Do we have to provide credit monitoring to those affected? Fraud response, right? We haven't even gotten into soft costs as far as your business is already, while your business is doing this, it's not operating. So whether it was a ransomware event that completely shut you down, or simply this was just an event and you're dealing with this, you're actually not dealing with your business, and that accounts for lost revenue, lost time. And guess what? Policy is going to kick in for that. So I think the parts and pieces we would want to focus on are just, look, when we're talking about cyber insurance, it's not just the thing that's going to pay for you to get back up and running. Getting there certainly is the sense of urgency, but there's a lot of parts and pieces that have to be, we have to go through that are required by state and at different levels. Anything else, Will, you add?
I mean, I do have some things to add, but mostly just from the chat. There's some really good questions in here.
Awesome.
Some we will address later. So I'm going to just say there was one about average legal forensics cost and limits on things like that. We're going to get to that. So we'll put a pin in that one. There is a question that from someone in England, right? So when you talk about lawyers, is this a mandatory thing in the US? As a Brit, I don't understand the emphasis on them. That's Nick. So what are your thoughts there, Reed? One thing, just to preface that, we did say, as we said last week, a lot of what we're sharing today comes from the US market perspective, but a lot of it will apply to across the globe when it comes to the insurance stuff. But this is probably one of those instances where things are a little different. So curious, Reed, what your thought is there.
Well, I can certainly speak to what Lloyd's does, and what London's doing is still also relevant over there. So so this is how it started, right? We have something that needs a quarterback. So it's an event that kicks off, and we need somebody to call the shots of what needs to happen next and why. So insurance first decided and said, you know what? It makes a lot of sense to have legal counsel in that position, because we want them first. We don't know what's exposed, right? And we need truth, we need facts, we need to establish an attorney-client privilege so we can just get to that right away, get an understanding of the event, and then deploy what we think is necessary. Well, forensics, I'm not going to say every time, but it's like 80-90% of the time, if merit, is going to be deployed, right? And that's going to churn up a lot of information, right? Again, that needs to be under a legal guise. Now, here's what I'll say. I'll actually contradict what I just said, because there is a reality. Is that necessary in every single situation? Absolutely not. If this is a gift card scam, do we need an attorney to be quarterbacking this? No. But if there is any suspected exposure of PII, that's whenever do you really want to dance with that liability? And the answer is typically no, you don't. You want to have some opinion in there that's going to provide that level of guidance to say, look, I understand the law. I understand what would it involve. Someone's saying PII, personal information. So if we say PII, PHI, protected health information, personal identifiable information, it's just any information pertaining to really what identifies an individual, and every state has different definition of that. Usually it's what you would suspect. It's like, your social security number, birth date, first, last name, driver's license number, anything. Typically, if it's 2 or more pieces of information that can tie you as an individual, the state's going to identify that as PII. So anytime that's exposed, your liability, which is now we're a third party, not yours, we're talking about someone else's that you just exposed, that's an issue. And you could understand why a lawyer would have an issue to be like, look, at the end of the day, do we want someone else coming back at you for the incident that either you failed to prevent or that perhaps you did participate in? So hopefully that provided some clarity.
Cool. Thank you. And just to summarize this slide, remember, hey, a lot more goes into incident response than getting your computer back up and running. And that's really the whole point here is, I don't need insurance. Isn't that what you're for? Well, there's a lot of things that you as an MSP are not equipped to handle. The legal stuff is a big part of it. The finding the money's lost is a big part of it. There's a lot of pieces that go into it. You're not going to help them recover the costs of business being down. So it's that kind of piece that they're not thinking of. So that's a big part of it. Okay, yep. Moving on to the next one.
Will, can I pause real quick, because I saw a question in the chat. So someone's asking which insurance company is on this webinar. So actually, here's the nice thing: we're not. Real quick. So FifthWall, we actually, sorry, I didn't mean to come out like we have no idea what we're talking about. No. We are actually a wholesaler that works with all of the insurance market. So when we're talking about this, it's coming from experience with us. We work with over 45 different carriers. And this is over the course of 7 years, right? And so this is the story we're telling after working both at the end client level, at the agent level, at the MSP level, at the carrier level, and even at the reinsurance level. So kind of think of us as we're that neutral party that's been able to sit and watch the storms blow by, but also work with every single individual that's been involved with that. Makes sense.
Cool.
So, all right, go ahead, Will. Just want to provide that
next
clarity.
Objection. Let's keep moving. This is awesome. This is one of the reasons I love the Huntress webinars. Is something that has taken us 20 minutes in the past is going to take us an hour, and I love it. All right, so moving on to the next slide. I have an MSP taking care of my business. An incident will never happen. I clearly played way too much Halo before making these slides. An incident will never happen. So that's a big piece of there's this misconception. Oh, that's what I'm hiring you for. I don't have to worry about insurance because I have you. You're taking care of everything. You're protecting me. This is a huge misconception that they're just safe now, right? Nothing's ever going to happen to me. First of all, how many of you on this call have 100% of your clients taking advantage of 100% of your stack? I can't imagine that's the case for most MSPs. There's always some. Sorry, go ahead, Becky.
I was going to say, and that's not just paying you for it, but actually using it, because it's very different. I mean, they might be paying for your whole stack, but are they using it? Are they following the policies? Like that, I think that's a good difference.
Yeah. And are they deploying it? Is it used correctly too?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a question was brought up. Are we seeing people check the boxes on an insurance form just to get the coverage? And it happens, right? That's one of the reasons why we work with MSPs is to say, hey, look, let's make sure that the stuff they're saying they have in place is actually in place. Because if they don't have it in place, claims will get denied, right? So that's a big piece of it. But in this case, let's say they're saying, hey, look, I'm using your MSP. Well, first of all, you're probably not taking advantage of the full stack. Secondly, 83% of breaches are due to them doing something, them clicking a link, them falling for a credit card or a gift card scam, them doing, and I got to stop saying breaches. I know, guys, sorry, I'm reading what's on the screen. 83% of incidents are due to that user error, right? And incident makes more sense anyway, because we're talking gift card scams, all sorts of different things, right? So nothing you as an MSP implements is going to prevent them from clicking a link that they're not supposed to, other than maybe doing a little bit of security awareness training, right? So security controls don't eliminate 100% of the risk. If they did, then, well, this would be the most amazing industry in the world, and you would all be billionaires because you've learned to eliminate risk. So the reality is, no, just because you have good security, even if you have peak security, it's not if, it's when, right? We always assume incident, right? So then there's this last piece. We actually get this pushback a lot. I can find that link for you and get it to Becky so she can share it out. It's in the doldrums of all my reports, but I'll grab it. And then this last part, we get this one pushback a lot from clients. Hey, you're an MSP and you have an insurance policy. So if there's an incident because you're linking to my system, your policy covers me, right? So I'm going to turn that over to Reed because he's the guy who has policies on his nightstand, so he knows this stuff better than I do. So Reed, go ahead.
Look, man, having policies on your nightstand is cool now, so it's fine. Actually, Arnold has a question that's pretty relevant to this that I'll hit afterwards. So yeah, okay. Your policy, let's talk about an MSP. What should you have if you're protecting yourself? And you talk to a good risk manager and they're saying, well, what insurance should I have for my business? I'm worried about cyber in general, right? Air quotes. Tech E&O is the policy you need to have. And here's why. Tech E&O does two things. An MSP's Tech E&O policy is going to protect you in all the ways that we just described and are about to describe. Okay, that's your business and it being affected by a cyber event. Okay, and that means many, many different things. The E&O piece is errors and omissions, which means this is a third-party liability coverage that's saying it's going to protect you in the event that someone, i.e. your client, finds an error or omission in your service. Okay. Now, that's really needed because you are a service-based company. You provide services, you provide a lot of parts and pieces that business is reliant on. However, that can be misconstrued and it can be in some instances justified to say, hey, I just got breached legitimately, or I had a cyber event, and it's your job to protect me. Right. So I want you to pay for this, or perhaps my lawyer is going to say that and they're going to sue you, or perhaps the carrier is going to come after your carrier, whatever it may be. That is not the intention of the policy. OK. And in reality, a lot of tech policies are looking to avoid that. Right. They don't want to be, they as in the carrier are not looking to be the coverage for your client. Right. So there's another reason I give MSPs of why is this an important conversation to have with your end client? Because their exposure is your exposure. That's just the reality, right? You're a service-based business. You're talking to your clients because you're providing a service, and they need to understand what's based in reality, right? What is this and what is this not? So that's the main thing. No, there's a difference. You have a tech E&O policy. They have a cyber policy. Yes, your policy can cover error and omissions, but it's not an open war chest in the event that they experience an event and they want to go ahead and start grabbing some money out. Carriers are not they're not going to allow that.
Plain and simple. All right. Here's the other side. So
that's actually one good thing just came in the chat. So should
good.
MSPs have both? Should they have E&O and cyber insurance?
Yes, the answer is 100%. Yeah. So what I described when tech E&O, and actually let me clarify, because that is a really good question. Most recent mature tech E&O policies, when I mean mature, I mean these are carriers that have looked at the situation and said, why isn't this just all in one form like it should be? When they provide tech E&O, it includes cyber liability for your business comprehensively. So it's not just like, here's a widget for cyber and it's bolted onto your tech E&O. No, this is a legitimate comprehensive policy for both instances. But you still may be in a scenario, because I don't know who you've worked with, your agent, and what they've advised. You may still have a tech E&O policy, and you may also have a cyber policy. Just be aware, in today's day and age, you can actually have those combined and save a lot of money.
And Reed, before we move on to the next slide, you said there was a question in the chat that was relevant you wanted to address.
Yes, it was just relevant because of kind of the third party. Arnold asked, I've had 3 events where the client was not at fault, but their client's email system was compromised and a wire transfer was intercepted and recrafted. So we're seeing a lot of that, right? And the interesting thing about that is actually those are covered. If your client has the right policy, we're going to talk about the fact that not all policies are created equal. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but the reality is that there is a module of coverage for that exact instance, because the line of liability still comes back to you. And so there are still plenty of instances where that's going to go back to the nexus. It's going to go back to who's really at fault here, right? But maybe everyone's at fault. All right. Either way, you shouldn't be caught holding the bag. So there is coverage for that. If that's happened, we can talk later. I'm curious how that was handled, depending on what the coverage looked like.
Great. All right. So this is the opposite of the previous question, or the previous objection. The first one was, hey, I don't need insurance because I have an MSP. This one's saying, I have insurance. I don't need security. I'll just file a claim. Right. So that's the other side of the conversation. So now they're pushing against you. You're saying, hey, look, I want to implement this EDR solution. I want to implement MFA. I want to get these things in place. And they're saying, I don't need that. I have an insurance policy. So this can lead to a lot of issues, particularly, first of all, rates are fluctuating. We talk about that all the time, right? So the rates are going up, they're going down. Right now, we're in a period of a softening market, which is nice, which means really all that really means at the moment is carriers are a little more competitive on their pricing. They're willing to come down a little bit. So we've seen renewals kind of staying level for the first time in a while, which is cool. It's not the same across the board, but right now we have seen a couple of renewals come through where the cost did not change, which that's kind of crazy compared to the past couple of years. But that said, I mean, if they have an open claim, and Reed, maybe you can speak to this a little bit more. If they have an open claim, it makes it harder for them to even be renewed or find new coverage, correct? If the claim is currently open, not if they've ever filed a claim, but if it's open.
Yeah. A year plus ago, you were viewed as the island of misfit toys. If you had a claim, hard stop. It was just hard to get coverage. That's not the case anymore. So you're right, Will. If you have an open claim right now, there's legitimate reason of why no carrier is going to want to take you on at that moment, because they need to see that is closed and there's finality to it, because they don't want to open themselves up to any possible cost from that event, right? They want to see that's been taken care of. So the reality is, filing a claim is a serious thing. Putting a carrier on notice is not. Saying, hey, it possibly might be a claim. That's fine. But when you file a claim and that goes through a process, right now the market's still really hard, meaning carriers are still extremely gun shy. Okay. And so the reality is you've got a situation where, you could say, hey, look, we're actually a better risk now. We just touched the stove and we know it's hot. But some carriers are still they're still gonna be a little queasy situation. Once they see that someone has been affected, they're gonna pay it out, and we'll cover that, because some say, I hear insurance doesn't pay out. Yes, it does. If you have the right policy, 100% it pays out. They're just gonna be very apprehensive of what the renewal is gonna look like. And that is gonna be, is it worth it that your insurance policy paid out, but now you're paying double or triple or quadruple now because your rate's gone up because you had an event?
Yeah, good. And we're going to talk about kind of what you hinted at. And there's a question from John Lowry in here about insurers fighting claims based on incorrect form fill outs and all that kind of stuff, or suspecting it. We're going to touch on that maybe in the next slide or two. So hold on to that. There is a question in here. The major factors in determining a coverage rate So we like to say there's three main factors when it comes to being considered for a cyber insurance policy. There's more, obviously, but the three main ones are your security posture. So how good is your security? And that actually tends to be more of a gateway, like Wes Spencer likes to say you must be this tall to ride this ride, right? So you actually have to hit that point before you'll even be considered by the carriers as a good risk. So that's kind of the entry point. And then the two biggest things that are going to affect your rates are going to be your industry and your revenue. So there are certain industries that are considered much more risky than others. So they're going to have to pay more. And then if you have a lot more to lose, then you're going to have to pay more into your policy. Anything to add there, Reed?
No, I think compared to what it used to be, as Wes would say, if you could fog a mirror, you get a cyber policy, right? And carriers learn the errors of their ways. So now base rates are determined. What's your size, right? Mm-hmm. How big are you? What's your revenue? And where do you fit? What's your industry? Are you in a high risk? And then the security factors come into play to rate to a degree, but more so for eligibility. So to your point, are you tall enough to ride or not?
When you talk about risky industry, would industries that are more compliance driven automatically fall in risky, where there's risk of fees or fines if you violate certain policies?
So they're going to want to know for those types of industries, are you compliant, right? Is there a way you can prove compliance? So yes and no, because there's overlap. Where they're seeing and determining higher risk is where they've already experienced pain. That's really because you're an evolving, emerging line of coverage for insurance. They don't have a lot of actuarial data yet, which is crazy, right? Cyber's still a baby. Fire, auto, you name it, has been around for decades and plus. So more so, every carrier is acting still independently and determining high risk classes based off of where's the pain come from the previous year. Now, it's actually been pretty common, like if municipalities, manufacturing, schools, these are ones that just across the board have been high risk because they've been hit so much. And a lot of it has to do to overwhelmingly low security posture, low budget towards security solutions. So you can kind of draw that line naturally. But some have chosen, I think once you started getting into more of the tech space, it's really up to the carrier and their appetite if they want to take the risk or not.
Sure. Yeah. So the last piece, and this is, as MSPs on the call, I think this is the part that pertains to you the most on this slide. The security requirements are going up for renewal each year. So we talk about security being that gate. Security is that entry point. You have to have the right security for your business in order to even be considered eligible for a cyber insurance policy. Those requirements are going up every year. And so to keep up with the data, to know what those security controls are, what are the bare requirements, and that you want to talk about non-renewal. I've run into instances where, back when I was working in FifthWall's agency channel, I had an agent brought to me a client and she said, "Hey, look, I need a policy for this one because their current carrier is denying them because they are being told their security is not good enough, but they did everything they had to get a policy last year." So the reality is every year the carriers are looking for more security. They're, like to Reed's point, cyber's a baby. So their underwriting guidelines are getting a little more specific, a little more strict. The actuarial tables are getting built. And now they're saying, hey, you know what, based on a company of your size and your revenue, based on your security risk, we aren't going to take you on unless you have these particular controls in place. And so they had to do even more work at the last second, which I know a lot of you have dealt with clients, to get the policy in place by the time it actually renewed. So the whole goal here is to say, hey, know what those security controls are. And as it approaches that renewal date, and we're going to talk about this next week in the whole QBR conversation, but as you get closer to that renewal date, have that roadmap in place to implement those things so that you're not running into the last second controls that are necessary for that policy. Saves a lot of time, saves a lot of hassle.
Well, Tyler has a really good analogy I like. He says requirements evolve over time. If they find a fault line in your hometown, your home insurance carriers are going to start forcing you to buy earthquake insurance, right? So let me use that analogy is carriers still don't know where the fault lines are. They're still figuring it out.
Yep.
And the reality is too, the scary part for them is even if they think they found them all, they also have to recognize new fault lines are forming all the time because cyber is not your average line of coverage. It's dynamic. We don't know what the next threat's going to be, right? Or maybe some of us might do. I'm not clever enough to know, but this is going to be evolving over time, perhaps continuously. I don't think there's a period in time where all of a sudden we just fully understand cyber and cyber criminals just say, you know what? I'm done with my bag of tricks. I'm just going to stick with these ones. These seem to work. So it is a tough question to answer because I think the reality is it's always going to be changing, which is actually where we come in. We always just want to make sure we're educating so we can get what's next, right? And Nick has a question, and maybe Will, you can answer this. What would you say is the minimum tech requirement then, AV wise? I mean, it's not just AV wise, but maybe we could speak to those controls real quick.
Yeah, we can go super quick through these. Multi-factor authentication, pretty much everywhere. Not everywhere. Like you're gonna have some applications talking about routers and switches. Probably not super important just yet in terms of, and when I say super important, I mean on the carrier side. So MFA, an EDR solution, ideally 24/7 managed. There are some smaller companies that might get away with not having it 24/7 managed, but why would you not do that in the first place? Next gen antivirus is 100% necessary. If you don't have a next gen antivirus solution, your client is not getting coverage. Security awareness training. What did I misread? There should be another one. Oh, patching. Vulnerability management. So they want to see critical patching and high vulnerability patching done within 30 days. I like to advise 7, but carriers 30 days, right? So if you can get those patches done in 30 days, they're in a good spot. So those are the base requirements, but again, that's shifting. Those goalposts are always shifting, and that eligibility is getting more focused, and the requirements are getting more intense, and that changes. Plus, if you're talking about a bigger company, so you're getting in higher revenue tiers, you're getting into the difficult industry classes, they're going to look for more. It might be more specific on their backups. Oh, backup is the other one I missed. Their backup solution might not just need to be segregated, it might need to be immutable, right? It's like these levels where, hey, what is, so they'll ask more specific questions based on the size in the industry. So that's a big part of it. So, okay, we good here?
There's one question in the Q&A that I want to make sure we address. So what are some examples of a carrier refusing to pay on a claim?
Some examples?
Yeah, have you seen specific examples?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's one really well-known one from last year. Travelers, it was hit the news. It was kind of all over the place. Not just refusing to pay a claim, but they actually rescinded the policy, meaning they were so mad. They said, this policy never even existed for you. I'm taking my toy and I'm going home. Those come about whenever it's clear fraud when it comes to what they were representing on the application to what was actually in place. So if they're saying, yes, we have MFA in place across all remote access, all email, and they have an event and forensics is done and they do forensics and they're like, wait a minute, no, you didn't have this at all, right? A carrier is very well within their right to say, you know what, no, like you lied to me. I was going to provide you a product, and that product was based off of you telling the truth in that application. So to boil this down, the only times we really see it is if there is a clear line, there was misrepresentation on the application. And I think this opens up a can of worms for MSPs because it's immediately like, well, they're asking questions that are not black and white. They're asking questions that are gray, okay? I'm not talking per se about those gray areas. It's more of the black and white ones. Is this in place or not? And then we also, I'll just say this, if you have any questions about that, I always advise an MSP, if you ever feel that level of uncomfort and you're filling an application for your client for one reason or another, expand, add more, write it on a sticky note, slap it on there, share more so you feel that they actually understand. I think I know what you're asking, but you're an insurance carrier, so you might actually know what you're asking because you're still figuring this out. Let me help you a little bit, okay? So hopefully that's helpful.
No, that's a good point. We always advise our partners, hey, you know what? Open up a text doc, take notes, and submit that. Now, at this point, those notes, that application, it's all at the mercy of your client or the agent, but you have that paper trail of saying, I filled this out, or these are the specific additions that I've added into this so that they have context, right? Context is key. We always want to make sure we have it. So that's important. Okay, so we want to keep
One-
rolling here. Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead,
a
Becky.
couple more questions came in, but one point.
Beautiful.
So I have to believe that so many of those applications are written so that an insurance company can review them at scale. So simple yes, no
Correct.
answers get them through them faster, but might paint you into having to be black or white.
Yep.
Where adding that makes them stop, pause, read, and agree with you. Especially if like the tool that you're using for, say, EDR, managed EDR, isn't on that drop-down list.
Yes.
Which we see a lot at Huntress.
Yeah.
And then there were a couple questions that came in too that I just, there's one in particular. Is there any movement towards requiring certifications for MSP staffs? So thinking like, malpractice insurance, you can't get that as a doctor if you're not licensed. Do you guys see there being a future where there might be some kind of a certification that you have to qualify for insurance?
So I think what this is leaning towards is insurance is looking to write a contract between the end client, the insured, and between the insured and the insurer, right? And so they're going to want to have a third party be a conditional requirement in that contract. So they're always going to hold the insured responsible, right? So where they're going right now, I'll say kind of like, I'm not going to say no to that because I don't have the crystal ball, but what I will say this is going towards is carriers care more about, all right, if we ask you a question, and maybe it's not the perfect black and white one, but we need to get more validation that this is accurate. That's where this is headed. And there's different parts that you'll see that are coming out of the insurance industry and even the tech industry to see more real-time validation that those controls are what, that the client did say correctly that these controls are there. And let's go even further. Are they properly configured? That's more so where this is headed rather than, seeing more certification at, I think, the risk advisor level. I think they're still very control focused, if that makes sense. Would you agree,
Awesome.
Will?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
So you got something, Becky?
Nope.
Okay,
Keep going.
cool. So we're going to keep rolling here. We got 4 more of these to get through. This one we've already kind of worked through a lot. Cyber insurance does not pay out. I mean, we talked about the carrier claim part. Carriers will not pay out if you're misrepresenting on the form. But Reed, you've said this before. Carriers don't want bad publicity, right? So, I mean, that like this Huntress thing, or Huntress, sorry, we're on a Huntress thing. The Travelers thing that happened last summer is a big one because now everybody knows that Travelers denied a cyber claim and everyone's talking about it. In the chat, I've seen multiple pieces where people said, hey, look, what about denial of claims because misrepresentation on forms, right? I mean, it's being talked about because it happened and Travelers is the one that did it first. So now they have that publicity. They created that stigma. So they don't want that, right? So they're not, and again, it's a contract. It's a finely worded contract, but it is a contract. And as long as you live up to your end, they'll live up to their end. And that's the way it works. It's if you have the right kind of policy. And that's the other piece here that we're actually going to dive into. We have endorsements here. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in detail in a minute. But there, like we said, not all policies are created equal. You've got comprehensive cyber liability policies that are going to cover you for a ton of different things. And then you've got these other things that get tacked on to general liability policies. They don't require any underwriting. They don't require any security controls. They just say, hey, look, why don't you just add this? It's like getting an ice cream cone and saying, do you want chocolate sprinkles on it? It only costs you 25 cents more. It's like that kind of thing where then you get it and you're like, the chocolate sprinkles, it just kind of added a little texture, but it really didn't do much for me. It's that
not
kind
chocolate.
of thing.
It's not real chocolate.
I don't really
either,
know what it is.
Honest.
Some of you might call them Jimmy's, I think, but either way, or maybe those are the colored ones now that I think about it. But either way, they're not great, right? It's the whole idea of you're just adding something that doesn't really do a whole lot to your experience. And that's an endorsement policy. So not all policies are created equal.
Real quick, Will, can I just,
please.
on the carriers don't want a bad publicity, like I just feel like this is a hot topic for most because in some instances, insurance doesn't want to pay claims. Insurance companies are not nonprofit organizations, let's be honest, right? So they're trying to make a profit. They're also, to oversimplify, they're a organized gambling company. They know how to place their bets, but they're playing knowing they're going to lose some. They just need to win enough. I've talked to enough heads of cyber departments across many, many carriers. They have said it is just a lot easier to pay the claim. They could fight it, but you're going to see they're only going to pick their battles very, very wisely. And they're going to pick those battles where they know it's explicit because it's going to become public in some way, shape, or form. They don't want bad PR. They want to keep being competitive, and they want to keep writing policies. And what they want is for someone to hear, oh, I had a traveler's policy and I actually got taken care of really well. That's more important to them than fighting a $100,000 event or a $200,000 event. Now, if it's a huge one, then yeah, they are going to start looking through it more meticulously. So just so everyone knows, just kind of on the other side, it's not as simple like they are going to find ways to not pay claims. It's just not the business they're in.
Yeah, I mean, another example recently, I mean, a lot of us heard about the Lloyd's decision about not covering nation state attacks or things like that, right? And there wasn't a whole lot of definition around it. So there needs to be good definition around those things on policies. And there was a carrier, I did a live stream about it a couple of weeks ago, I think, but there was a carrier who tried to deny a multi-million-dollar claim that they had to pay out part of because the hackers came out of Russia, but it didn't mean, and the courts determined, hey, you know what? This doesn't mean that it was a nation state attack. Never in the history of an acts of war claim or an acts of war exclusion did it ever apply in this type of situation. So it wasn't denied. The claim had to go through, but you're going to start to probably see more specific language around it as a result and things like that. So I'm curious where that goes. Just wanted to bring that up. Don't want to derail anymore. Let's keep moving. So Reed, this is where I want you to talk. I mean, you've been talking a lot, but I want you to talk here too, because this is literally Reed's nightstand. I took a picture of it, snuck into his house. He didn't know. And this is what he sees. So, clients will say, I have a policy, I'm safe. First of all, that's a contradiction because if you have a policy, it's supposed to kick in because you weren't safe, because something happened. So there's that piece. But second, I do want to talk about limits and what they are. So knowing your policy and why those are important, just real high level. And then just quickly, the 4 different types of coverages you see here.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, let's get facts. My nightstand's pretty clean right now, but
got to make room for
I am
that
married,
Nintendo
I have
Switch.
children. I am a nerd, but I mean, all right, no, it's what I do. This is what I'm good for. All right. Speaking of what I'm good for, let's talk policies real quick. I'm going to try to keep this brief because I don't want people to go to sleep. A comprehensive policy, I've used that word a lot, I think. Comprehensive means like we have a definition, and it's not just internal for us, but now it's kind of become somewhat standardized of like, what does a good cyber policy actually look like? And the reality is a good cyber policy is recognizing what's happening in the real world, and it's creating coverages to protect that business. And it should, because new perils are being created in cyber regularly, be up to date and accommodating and accounting for those, okay? So when we look at a comprehensive policy, that's what we're looking for. Endorsements, they're the bolts on. Will talked about them. Someone says, yeah, Mr. and Mrs. MSP, don't worry, I got coverage, I got cyber. Like, okay, it's like you have a conversation about it with your agent? No, they just told me I have cyber now. That's not cyber. They attach it to your general liability, most likely. It probably costs you like anywhere between $70 and $300 total. And it's limited to very, very small coverage. It's like a snack. Like, and let me give you an example. It'll limit legal and forensics to $5,000. Minimum for forensics right now is like at least $12K. So like, where is that helping me? So that's what I mean is like, they just aren't meant to support the weight of what you're looking to support. Riders, same. I'll just put them in one bucket. Warranties aren't bad, but warranties are very singular focused for one thing, plain and simple. You're not looking to control this risk with one single facet of something that can be very multifaceted. And then we're at standalone. Standalone right now, it's comprehensive. It's covering actually everything was on that previous slide. So legal, forensics, all those direct third-party costs. And then, you probably would assume or hope, but it's covering a lot of the things are soft costs too. And these are things I call out because it's really important. If a client's like, I don't know what that cyber policy is really going to do. Well, if you're down, what's the average downtime, right? And I think it's north of 14 days. I can't remember exactly. It seems to be changing. But what does that look like? And let's just talk about that. I mean, what does a day look like? What does a week look like? What does 2 weeks look like? Guess what? A cyber policy would actually cover all the lost revenue. We talk about reputational damage as something that's often overlooked. Your business just experienced an event. And if it was large enough that you had to provide notification, people know about it. What does that mean for your business? right? Are you going to lose clients? Are you not going to be able to retain clients? Are you not going to get new business because now you look less secure? You have this stigma about you now. It means something. Yeah, you can actually quantify that, file a claim, and they will write you a check. It's crazy. And then we get into the crime coverages. We get into, I think, what probably most people are more privy to, which is like ransomware, social engineering, basic trickery. And we see a lot of sublimits there. Okay. That's not necessarily a huge red flag because most of the industry is sublimiting those very purposefully because they are hard costs. It is black and white. They got to write you a check right then and there because you were just duped out of $100,000. Well, that stinks. I'm a carrier. I'm going to write you a check for $100,000. So they're limiting those, try to limit their exposure. And they're also looking, generally speaking, they want to be competitive. So if a lot of the social engineering events in their catalog, in their claims, are less than $250K on average, then they know that's a good limit. That's where they could be competitive. It's not limiting you to everything else, though. You still have full limit access to credit, legal, forensics, all of that. It's just how they decided to do this. So that's my soapbox. Comprehensive is meant to be multifaceted. It's meant to cover what they're seeing in the market. And if it's not, then it's not comprehensive.
Awesome.
How was I, Will? That was like 4 minutes.
That was the fastest I've ever heard it. Okay. Quick questions I want to touch on real quick. So using the Kaseya breach as an example, who gets covered in that type of, or who does the covering in that type of event? The client cyber policy, the MSP's policy? Is it something else? I think all of the above. So the reason being, like we said earlier, the MSP's policy is not going to cover the incident that occurred on the client's policy. So, but that's why an MSP needs to have a tech E&O policy because, oh, hey, I'm using this product. This product caused my client to have an incident, and therefore they're going to come after me. So you're going to see that. This was probably the closest thing, Reed, we've had to like a catastrophic event. Yeah.
Correct. It's the Spider-Man meme. Everyone's pointing at each other, right? And you've got, honestly, and cyber insurance has not experienced a catastrophic loss yet, which is crazy. So like a hurricane is a catastrophic event. A hurricane actually affects so much in insurance, it's kind of crazy. But we haven't seen that one nexus event that has initiated hundreds or thousands of claims. It just hasn't happened yet. And Kaseya was probably the closest thing that when we saw it on the surface, we're like, oh boy, here we go. I think Wes coined it as a buffalo jump, right? But the amount of claims that actually came in were really, really small. So I think to answer that question, a finger is going to be pointed from someone, whether it's the client, whether it's the MSP pointing up to a distributor, whatever it may be. And the first reaction is going to be, okay, is my policy, am I responsible for this? And should my policy cover it? And in those types of events, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get carriers that are going to do what's called subrogation. And they're going to look to say, well, I don't know if my policy should be, I think your policy. And it's a Spider-Man meme, but they're doing it in a room. And hopefully they're doing it in a room where they're going to come to a conclusion on who's going to be paying what. But guess what? It's a scary, scary scenario. It's what actuaries are in. That's what they fear the most right now. That's the systemic event.
Subrogation, just real quick, big insurance-y word. If you think of like if you think of like a car accident, if you get into a car accident and you're not at fault, the other person is, but your insurance company pays you out, they're now going to go after the other person's insurance company to get the money that they paid out because you weren't at fault, right? It's that kind of mindset. So they're trying to figure out who's at fault here, who pays who, where's the money coming from. Okay. So there was one other question, Reed, real quick. We have 2 slides left, so we have time to address this. If we take over a client that has an incident in the past that may not have handled completely, that may not have been handled completely, probably, is there any liability for the MSP to take on someone who had an incident in the past? Like, is the MSP now at risk of someone coming after them? Probably not, right? I don't know how you would.
No, if they experience, there's 2 different things we want to clarify. If it was a claim and the claim's been closed, no. Once a claim is closed, it's closed. That's why like closing a claim is sometimes difficult. They can reopen it, but if you're asking, I think really you're looking, if you take a client on and they've experienced an event in the past, hopefully you're dealing with someone that's touched the stove and know it's hot. And so my hope would be that they would adopt solutions you're telling them to adopt and move in the direction you want them to move. If they're not, I think I would second guess that client because they got hit by a car and they're like, I don't need to look both ways across the street though. It's fine.
It's not funny.
I mean, lightning only strikes once, so you're fine.
Yes, of course.
Right.
Cool. All right, we got two more here. This one was actually put up at the very beginning of the call when we asked about particular objections that you've heard. We don't have any sensitive data. First of all, if you have at least one employee, you probably have sensitive data on your system, because payroll is sensitive data. All the information that goes into payroll is sensitive data. Having access to those things is sensitive data. Then taking payments. So if you take any kind of payments, you're collecting client information, you're collecting credit card numbers, anything that could leak if there's an incident. And then let's be real, if you have internet exposure, you have something to lose, right? So sensitive data restoration, like we've talked about with all those limits, right? If you're getting the objection of, I don't have any sensitive data, that's not the only thing that happens if you have an incident. Again, the sensitive data piece is a big part of it. Hey, you know what? You've got legal that may need to get involved, notification, all that credit monitoring stuff that may need to happen based on the state you live in. It may even need to happen even if you think you don't have any. They may still have to bring someone in to check, right? So it depends on the state you live in. There's all those laws. And then lastly, again, there's a lot more to deal with. It's the same kind of response as the how fast can you get me back up online piece. It's like you're only thinking very narrowly right now. An incident is very broad. So there's so many things that could happen. Go ahead, Reed. One
thing, are we covering, there's data, there's also access.
Yep.
Which I don't know okay, so real quick on access. Yeah, so if you get an objection and they say, I don't think I have an exposure, I don't think I have a risk. Okay, let's talk about data first. What do you have that's valuable? And that's an exercise in itself. But even if you're talking to a brick wall still, you can start asking questions like, who do you work with? Who do you have access to? Who could possibly be impacted by your negligence, right? If someone got a hold of your email and used it and started doing spoofing or whatever it may be, it could be really simple things like that. But there's a lot of incidents we see that are lily pad. They want to get to a target because they want to utilize them to get to other targets. And often maybe they weren't even targeted. It was a wide net attack. And hey, they opened up the email and someone's like, well, this is a small barber shop, but they still have, X, Y, or Z, or maybe it's a manufacturer that used to not be viewed as really having anything at all. But then they found out manufacturers are a treasure trove because they have so much access to all the other businesses they work with. So just make sure you're hitting on both data and access. In one of the two buckets, you're going to hit a nerve.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So Robert preemptively dropped it on us, but here's our last one. Hackers only go after the big businesses, right? So we always like to say phishing is... I literally put that up there at the last second. So phishing is about casting a net, not a line, right? So we are, when you think of different ways to fish, I mean, when I go down to the dock, I live on Long Island, I walk down to the bay, I cast a snapper pole, I'm fishing for snappers. But then if I go out on some big vessel where I'm throwing nets out and I'm trying to collect as many fish as I can, I'll sort them out later. That's kind of what phishing actually is. So if you think of using the literal word fishing with an F to think of how this is working, they're casting a net. They're not targeting one individual person. Sometimes they are, you got like anonymous hack groups and stuff, but usually it's casting a net. They don't care who they take down because they know there's something to get out of it. And I mean, ransomware as a service is a thing today. They have these things that's all on autopilot. It's not just these people going out and saying, and like, we talk about, you see it on LinkedIn all the time, right? The hacker is not the hooded guy in his basement. I mean, I'm in my basement right now, so if I wore a hood, it would look like it. But the hacker is not that guy, right? It's not just this dark hooded that with the Guy Fawkes mask on and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of them are businesses. They run like businesses, so they're not worried about. They're not looking to target necessarily all these companies. They're just press and play and seeing what happens. And then this one's a good one. So like
can I give a quick analogy on that?
Yeah, please.
Well, it's basically, here's the analogy I give. Hackers are like criminals walking down the street pulling on car handles. Okay. They don't really care until they find an open door. Then they care. So you could be any business, doesn't matter. Now, if there is a Mercedes versus a beat up 1985 Toyota, right? Are they going to gravitate towards the Mercedes? Sure. Right. But generally speaking, they're just trying to see if there's an open door. Sorry.
That's actually perfect. When I lived in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, the crime was so high, they said, keep your doors unlocked because the criminals would come and smash your windows. and then look. So you don't keep anything sensitive in your car. No sensitive
Great
data.
place to raise your kids. Good job, Will. All right, continue.
I don't live there anymore. But anyway,
I know.
so this last one, I really love this last point. Like insurance companies, hackers are going to follow the data, and they know what industries are just as unsecure, as the insurance carriers do. So what we were talking about way earlier in the call, where you have all these high risk industries, they're high risk because a lot of times they're just really resistant in implementing the right security. Or you think of like a municipality or a school where they have these annual budgets, and since they're not prioritizing the security, by the time it comes up in the budget, they're not thinking about it. So not all the security that should be always gets put in. So what happens is, I mean, the hackers know this. The threat actors know this. They know who's reluctant, and that's why manufacturers, for example, have been getting hit really hard. Manufacturers say, well, all I do is make stuff. I'm not a target, so I don't need a lot of security. Boom. Now they're all getting hit. So they're considered a difficult to place industry now. So it's just that kind of mindset. And as Becky said, some MSP once said, you're not too small to be hacked. You're just too small to make the news about it. So obviously Capital One, Uber, these massive companies that a bunch of people use, when they get hit, it makes the news. When mom and pop's dodgeball shop down the street gets hit, no one hears about it except the customers. So I always use that example, Reed.
What's a dodgeball shop, Will?
Where you buy dodgeballs, Reed.
Where I want to go to there. So I'm just curious.
So one point that you guys brought up in this conversation is the hacking is actually a business. For those of you on the webinar that don't know, so we're happy to jump on as Huntress and do webinars with your end users. And one of the most popular ones that we do is on the business of cybercrime. And it is this whole, like, we've seen it before, where hackers ask the hacked MSP to leave a review. Tell me about my service today. Did I answer all your questions? Did I take care of you? Like, it's that level of business that's just insane. Yeah. So yes, I want to go to the dodgeball store.
Yes, I want to go to there. I'm glad someone got that reference. Thank you. It's been a while.
Always.
It's been a while.
Always. Well, that's it from our end, and we're almost at time. So we have 3 minutes. Any other questions from anybody? Look at that.
Oh, Kat. Yes, very mafia style.
Yes, yes. I'll say this. If Will, we have another one next week, correct?
We have one more next week where we're talking about the QBRs. I'm just scrolling through the chat real quick to see if I missed any.
Yeah, make sure we got everything.
Yeah, so like there's insurance is weird. I'm just going to say it, like, and it's getting weirder. But that's what we're trying to do here, is just kind of try to demystify. I think that word's overused, but it's true here, where we're just want to kind of simplify to a degree, give someone some base level knowledge. And then obviously, just if you have questions about any of this, we can be here to answer those questions.
Brett. It's great. That's what we're going to do next week. We're going to solve all the problems for you. So one question came up: is EDR considered next gen AV, or did we say we need EDR plus next gen AV? If your EDR solution incorporates next gen AV, then sure, great. A lot of them do check that box, I know, but some might not. That's where the question's a little weird. That's where calling up the vendor and seeing could be helpful. But yeah, I would say I'm not going to give you a unanimous is not the right word. An all-encompassing answer on that one, because it really is case by case.
Case by case. But if you think like, oh, I am using someone and that is included, and so really I'm answering this by answering another question, I can put it on the app. Like if for whatever reason you feel uncomfortable, MSPs are always going to be positioned in this role of like, here, it's technical, fill this out because I don't understand it. Okay. And then you're going to feel uncomfortable because I don't understand the liability I'm taking on. Right. So that's a subject in itself. We can talk about, I could talk about it for like 15 minutes, but just the more you say, the better in terms of just explaining your understanding of how to answer that question.
Perfect. So we are at time. Jim, hold on to that question. Join us next week and we will make sure we answer it. I know we touched on next gen antivirus last week, but I don't know if Dustin actually said anything about it. He might have just assumed you got to have it. So we can poke him a little bit next week and get a more definite answer for you. But yeah, we're good on time here. Becky, anything else you wanna wrap up with?
Make sure you join us next week. And after all of these series, all of this will be posted on one of the Huntress landing pages, so you can get access to it later. And we'll try and parse all this out. Thank you everyone for attending and for all of your fantastic chat. You kept this very entertaining. Will and Reed, thank you for letting me join you.
That was fun.
I learned a lot today as well. And we'll see you all again next week.
Awesome. Thanks
Thanks
everyone
for having us. Take care.
Thanks, guys.